All right. Welcome to Real World Witness, everyone. I'm Chrissy, your host. I am here with my special guest for the evening, David Bennett. He is an author, energetic healer, the host of Dharma Talks podcast. He has been on many radio and television shows such as The Story of God with Morgan Freeman, Angels Among Us, in various magazines and blogs talking about his near-death experiences. And he was recently on Next Level Soul telling his testimony. His website is dharmatalks.com. And welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Christy, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Sure. Yeah, so as you know, I think when I emailed you originally, I saw you on Next Level Soul, and I was so intrigued by you've had many experiences. It's not just one experience, which is what I not I love that you had all these experiences, but it's amazing to me that you've had all these. So anyway, so I want to start out, if you could sort of give us a little bit of background of sort of how you prior to this, and then kind of we'll just go into your experiences.
Sure. It's kind of funny though. You bring up, that I've had many experiences. That's not uncommon. I talk to a lot of experiencers, and it's not uncommon for someone who's had a profound experience, some kind of profound spiritual experience, to have other experiences afterwards, and they all build upon each other. So I was an engineer, and I wasn't I was I wouldn't say that I had a faith, because I had grown up in a lot of different families, and so I was bounced from one family to the next, and so I
Right.
saw how they had different religions and different beliefs, and I didn't really see how they had benefited from them. So
Right.
I never really adopted a belief or anything. So and so I had kind of because I really didn't feel anybody was looking out for me. I had a very self-serving kind of philosophy, that you cut your swath through life, and that's how you
Yeah.
get by.
Right.
And
Well,
it's kind of a brutal philosophy.
yeah, especially when you're young like that. So were you adopted, or was it just you're in within your family, you were just kind of shifted around, or what happened there? Like,
My
how did
mom
that
was
all?
a single mom. My mom was a
Mhm.
single mom, and back then it wasn't a real popular thing to do. So she would place me herself. She would place me
Mhm.
with these families, and
Mhm.
and I mean, it was back in those days. It was like she'd give them $5 a week or something like that,
Right, right.
and but a couple of the families were a bit either neglective or abusive. And so
Right.
she would find out, and then she'd move me to another family and to another family.
Wow.
So I had a lot of bad experiences as a child, and I just didn't, I didn't really know my mother at that age.
Mhm.
It wasn't until much later in life that I really got to know my mom. So
Wow, that's interesting. Well, do you
yeah.
think that that is one of the, like, I find it interesting that because you were in such turmoil and had such trauma early on, do you think that that played a part in having near death experiences? I mean, do you think that it kind of shaped you in a way, because you could go jaded one way or another, you know what I mean? Having that kind of a background, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, I became very self-serving and very
Hmm.
central motivated mostly.
Yeah.
But I don't know that, because I know so many experiencers that have had, you know, experiences similar to mine.
Hmm.
And I don't see a correlation between the adversity in my early life to this. But what I find really kind of interesting was the fact that I focused on, I was an engineer. I
Hmm.
became an engineer, and I really, I worked toward being successful and being an engineer. And I became the chief engineer of a research vessel, and we did underwater exploration. And
Nice.
I was very proud and egotistical about that,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah.
And so to have a profound spiritual experience, it just blew my mind. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it, to tell you the truth, at
Right.
first.
Well, as an engineer, you're more scientific oriented too versus the spiritual. So it's like a whole new world. I mean, that
It
opened up
was.
for you.
Absolutely. It was a total paradigm shift, I mean,
Yeah.
to realize that there's this other reality, which is
Mhm.
more real than this reality, which, that
Yes.
really freaked me out.
I know. Isn't it crazy? I mean, like, I know, and there's so much to the world. We're so much in a matrix that people, I mean, people are waking up from it and like starting to realize how big it is. But it's so crazy because when you're in that little box, like I always say, I mean, yeah, life was simple when I wasn't awake. I was, just, what I'm saying? Like when you're not awake,
Yeah.
when you think that you're just in this little, this is it, and you go to work and you have your career and you do whatever, and then to realize, oh my gosh, this isn't even the way we're supposed to be living, really, the way that we've been taught, basically. And I think it just opens up your whole entire uh I think vision of everything, of life. There's so many aspects to it, and so I could totally see you being blown away. I can't even imagine from scientific, like very, very stringent almost, because that's how the scientific things are. And that's why it's like been so hard, I think, for science to kind of quantify spirituality and the soul and that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally agree with you. It creates a number of challenges. Each
Hmm.
experiencer, I mean, because each experience is unique as well. So, but they come back and suddenly they have experienced something otherworldly,
Right.
something that is outside of this realm. And
Hmm.
and one, you and I are speaking right now with a common language and a common understanding of how to communicate, but suddenly you've been thrust into this otherworldly experience that you don't have words for. And
Right.
so first, you don't even know how to describe what you've experienced. And then
Right.
and then you have to be able to share it with someone who you trust, that isn't going to think you're nuts,
Yeah.
because you're questioning that yourself, okay?
Exactly.
So you're questioning your sanity, and so you share it with someone, and if you get a positive, supportive response, that's excellent, and
Yeah.
there's more of that now because there's a lot more information about these types of spiritual
Hmm.
experiences. But back when I had it, because my experience was back in 83, it's quite a while ago,
Right.
we didn't have that type of, people weren't as aware of these
Yeah.
experiences. And so my first sharing of it didn't go well. And so
Wow.
I shut it down for over 11 years until I had a second experience. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, yeah. So, why don't you just kind of explain your near death experiences and kind of what you went through? That'd be great.
Yeah, but I mentioned in 1983, that was my first experience, and it was
Mhm.
a near-death experience where I drowned. I worked as a chief engineer on a research vessel, and we were just coming back. We got caught by a storm, and
Mhm.
and we launched one of the small rubber Zodiacs to bring some people into the harbor. And on the way in, during the transit, we got caught in a breaker zone, and we had one come down on top of us, actually folded the Zodiac right in half. I like to say like a peanut butter sandwich, just folded it in half. And I was in the bow trying to navigate, and I was thrown into the water. And
That is so scary to me. That's one of the things I always like. Can you? I mean, like the only thing I ever had was there was a mean kid in when I was like what, second grade or something. We were in the pool and this mean kid, he like dunked me in the water. I couldn't get up. I can't even imagine in the waves in the big ocean like that. You must have been terrified. I would have been. I
not
don't even know.
really,
Where's
not
your
not
Okay?
really,
Yeah, tell
because
me about that because yeah, I'm
no, I
interested in
wasn't.
that.
I was absolutely calm, actually, because I was a commercial diver. I worked, I mean, we did underwater exploration. I've got thousands of hours in the water. So I wasn't freaked out. And I also had a life vest on that night. It was one of the rare things we normally didn't wear because I mean, we lived our lives at sea. And so we didn't wear life vests a lot.
Right.
But it was a really rough night, like, 25, 30-foot seas that night.
Wow.
So we had life vests on. So I wasn't too concerned until I never made it up to the surface, and then you start ruminating a little bit, you start saying, is the life insurance paid for, things like that, and then eventually the euphoria of oxygen deprivation happens, and you try to breathe, and when you do that, you drown. But the neat thing is there's an instant of agony, of burning, because it was salt water in your lungs.
Right.
But then boom, you pop out of your body. And I found myself in absolute darkness, this absolute darkness that was, but it was quiet, it was calm, it was peaceful. I just come from this very violent death. I mean, my body was being tossed around like a rag doll in the sea. And so to have this calm and this peace, and it was actually comfortable. But it also felt like I wasn't alone. It felt like there was a presence with me in this absolute darkness. Now, I know a lot of experiencers, and I know some that have experienced what they call this the void. I know, and it can be terrifying. But I just came from this violent environment to this peace and quiet. So to me, it was I was more curious as to what's going on here.
Right.
And right.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah. And then I saw the light. I saw this pinprick of light at first, and then it felt like I was moving toward it, or it was moving toward me. And as I got closer, I saw that the light was millions and millions of fragments of light, and they were all in unison and moving together. And 3 fragments broke away and they came toward me. And as they were coming toward me, I was starting to feel this love. I was just feeling this being wrapped in this love, like a warm embrace. And the 3 that greeted me were welcoming me home. And it was, sorry, I still get, it's
okay.
hard.
I just got chilled when you said that.
They welcomed me home, and I was, it was the most wonderful feeling in the world. And eventually a dozen of these light beings greeted me. And I started, and I was in this curious state. I looked and I realized I was transforming into one of these fragments of light myself.
Wow. So amazing.
And we went into the light. It was communicated that, we went into the light further into this area. It felt like a giant bubble and the sphere. And inside, we started to relive my life. But it was kind of curious. It was like my consciousness fragmented into these multiple streams of consciousness so that I could experience my life not only from my perspective, but from everyone I'd ever interacted with. So as I would interact with someone, I would experience it from my point of view, their point of view, spectators' point of view, and all at once. And you would get to see how your actions would create these ripples, these effects that these people would feel. And it felt like ripples that would emanate out. And so it was like I was just in awe of this whole thing. But I also remember I said I was kind of a brash young man, and I had that brutal philosophy. Well, I wasn't real gentle in my life. I would if people didn't see things my way, I didn't have time for them, and I would just move through them or around them or some way get by them, right?
Right.
So I wasn't the nicest of people. And this soul family, I call them my soul family, this dozen of light beings that are there in the sphere with me, and they're experiencing my life just the way I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
kind
so,
of because you think that people are watching from sort of our angels and guides and everything are watching, but like to be in the room doing your review and then having all these other people there that are like, it's not a judging, but it's like, oh my gosh, like they're
no, in
all
fact, if anything, it was they were loving me and supporting me. They weren't judging me at all. I was judging myself. I was judging what was happening, and
Mhm.
I was ashamed that they had to experience it.
Wow.
But I brought that. They didn't.
Mhm.
That was not the environment that they put me in. That was what I brought with me. And I really feel that the dying is a process. I really feel that
Mhm.
we have to let go of our life. And a lot of these things that we experience, the welcoming, a life review where, with non-judgment, that these are ways
Mhm.
that we can release ourselves from that life.
Right.
Um, but eventually I started seeing things that I didn't have a reference to. And so,
Mhm.
and I didn't know it at the time, but I actually saw elements of my future.
Wow.
And then I got to a point um, where the light itself, all these
Mhm.
millions upon millions of fragments of light, spoke in unison, and I perceived them as God. I perceived
Yeah.
this as just God, this voice, and it said, "This is not your time. You must return." Those are the exact words that
Mhm.
were presented to me, and I said, "No way. Mm-mm.
I don't blame you.
I am
Don't
not
do
going
that.
back."
I don't want to
To
go
me,
back.
that
Please don't
body
make me
was,
go
yeah, yeah. Don't make me go back. I didn't even say, "Don't make me go back." I said, "No, I'm not going back." I
right.
refused. And I argued because I argued that I have found a family that I didn't know exist.
Mhm.
I'm loved like I've never experienced love, and I know that that body is broken and cold and dead,
Yeah.
and I I don't want anything to do
And
with it.
then
So
so,
I'm
oh
trying to
my
be
god.
nice.
Yeah, I know. That's okay.
but but the light spoke one more time, and
Mhm.
this time it said, "You must return. You have a purpose."
Yep.
And that word purpose just had this
Rings in your
resonance to it. When we're on the other side, we have an expanded consciousness that is so much greater than what we have available to us here. We're
right.
connected. It's like all the souls that ever were and all the souls that ever will be are part of our consciousness. So we have that collective understanding. And
Mhm.
when I heard purpose and it resonated into my being, I understood it. And with
Mhm.
understanding, I immediately went to acceptance. It just seemed so simple, so efficient.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's when I found myself back outside my body, watching my body get still being tumbled and
You
tossed in
did.
the wave.
So
And
pretty.
and three of the light beings came with me, and we were watching as my body got tangled up in the bow line. And
Mhm.
the bow line, the bitter end of the bow line was tapping my lifeless chest. And I was staring at it thinking, how is the enormity of me, because you're in this expansive state, going to fit in there? It just looks so confining.
Right.
And I watched as excuse me, I watched as a wave came
Mhm.
and hit the zodiac. I'm watching my body in this rope that's
Mhm.
dancing around my body, but the meanwhile the zodiac was above, and there must have been a some air left in one of the pontoons, and when another set of waves hit it, it
Mhm.
yanked it up, and when it did, it wrapped that line around this shoulder and this thumb, and yanked my arm up and pulled me up to the surface.
Wow.
And I got tangled up in all the lines and everything, and the waves were beating me up against the wreckage, and that's when it
Holy.
pushed some of the salt water out of my lungs, and I and my soul family gave me a gentle push at the same time, and I
You're like,
came back to my body. So
wow.
it was a tough night, and we
Yeah.
were still a mile offshore. We had to swim another mile through waves. It was
So did they drag it? What did they do? So they had to like basically use the same, however, you know how they drag a body in. If you're like, how did
no,
they pull you out or what? How did that work?
no. These guys that I was with
Hmm.
stayed there. They were all looking. We were all made. They all wanted to all get together to make sure that everybody
Yeah.
was safe, and we'd all go in together. And
Hmm.
so we all rallied around this wreckage, and we just swam in with we used
Wow,
the wreckage as our rally point, and we swam in together.
that's
And
amazing.
yeah, it was yeah, it
How long
was
did it
tough.
take for you to recover from that? I mean, and
The
then what were
funny
you
thing is,
thinking
when
after
you
all?
come back from one of these experiences, you feel like you're half here, half there.
Yeah, I could see
And
that.
so I had this kind of expanded knowing,
Hmm.
and so as we were I was having a hard time staying on the surface. I didn't realize, but my actual life vest had
Hmm.
it's an old fashioned, really old fashioned Mae West life vest that was, the fiber filled pillow type,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it had dry rotted, and
Wow.
the fiber filling had become saturated with salt water. It was actually what was pulling me down. It wasn't bringing me up to the surface.
God.
So I just instinctively knew that, because I had this greater awareness, and I
Hmm.
unclasped it and took it off, and I was able to stay up on the surface from that and help. And I just hung on to the with my good arm. I hung on to
Hmm.
the wreckage, and I just scissor kicked to help swim all of us. We were all swimming,
Right.
together to get into shore.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And so then you go to the hospital, obviously, and or whatever, and then from that moment on, you're afraid to say it. Like at that point, I mean, obviously your colleagues are probably like, "What happened? What went on?" And did you tell them about what happened, or were you afraid to
I
even say
well,
anything?
that they they didn't say anything until the next day. To tell you the truth, when you get a bunch of guys that suddenly face their own mortality, face death,
Yeah.
because that was a dangerous situation we were all in.
Mhm.
Young men tend to, when they recover from the trauma, tend
Mhm.
to cover everything up with this bravado.
Yeah.
All right. So nobody said anything that night. In fact, everybody was very introspective,
Mhm.
especially me, because I had
Well,
just
yeah.
died from back, and I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on and what was that purpose I was just told about.
Right.
So,
Right.
I was I was incredibly introspective as to what had happened, and
Yeah.
everybody around me, they were very quiet, very focused on
Mhm.
getting help and getting home, and and
Yeah.
just and so they didn't ask. Nobody asked questions until days later.
Okay.
And by then, I had tried to share it with my first wife at the time,
Mhm.
and it didn't go well. And so that was kind of a tell for me not
Yeah.
to share it. And also, the work that we were doing back in the early 80s, underwater exploration, was incredibly dangerous. It still
Mhm.
is today.
Yeah.
And so death and talk about death was a taboo subject with other people in the industry. So
Yeah.
it just wasn't something that you didn't go down that road.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I could share it right away. So when they started
Mhm.
asking me, they said, Dave, you were gone a long time. And
Yeah.
and what happened, And I would just say, "Oh, Neptune spit me back," and stuff like that. I
Make
would
fun of
cover it
it.
up,
Joke about it. Yeah.
because I didn't trust that they would treat it fairly. I didn't,
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. I thought,
Right.
oh my gosh, and it scared me. It frightened me, because when I came back, suddenly I started seeing auras. I didn't even know what an aura was. I called it life force energy. I didn't know what it was. And I started seeing, when I would look in someone's eyes, I could see their light.
Wow, interesting.
And yeah, I could see their fragment of light. And so it really freaked me out. I'm an engineer. Things were black and white up until that moment in life. And now suddenly I'm thrust into this world with multicolor and
the woo. They call it the woo-woo, you know. I mean,
it was like,
blow
my mind. And it was hard. So I didn't feel like I could share it. So I tried to tuck it away. I tried to, I ended up repressing it, quite a bit of it. And I just accepted what I could, because that life review and that love was just a huge element in my experience. So a young man in my mid-20s, having that life review, I got to see who I really was.
Yeah.
And I understood that, well, I could accept that this is who I am. I've got a lot of work to do on myself.
Yeah.
So acceptance of myself. And another thing that I saw was tolerance, because I saw how people were crossing my path and we were interacting. And I saw that, a lot of times we interact with people and situations that we may not agree with. But it's their choices. It's a situation we can change. We don't have to. We can be tolerant. We can be tolerant of it. So acceptance of myself, tolerance of others and situations. And then another thing that really struck me was truth. Truth became paramount, and it became a real search in my life, along with a search for that love, that unconditional, just pure love. And so truth, though, was a little different than the factual truth I knew as an engineer. Right. It was personal truth. Within our heart resonates when we experience certain things in our life that are our personal truths. And so this was a new concept for me. Along with acceptance and tolerance, those were all new concepts for me. But I could work with that. And then I tried to just push the rest of the experience away. I didn't want to deal with it. I'll take this little bit of it and I'll move on with that.
Right.
But
it kind of gives you a new perspective, but in a different level, but you're just still kind of on the same surface, like, well, okay, let me just move forward with these pieces, and the rest of it, I'll just, put it in a box over here, put a pin in it, and kind of like move forward with your life, So I totally get that.
I like to say I put it in a box, wrapped it up with duct tape. Divers love duct tape.
With duct tape. That's about right.
And I shoved it as far back in my head as possible. The funny thing, though, is these experiences don't let you forget.
Yeah.
Because you live with it every day. And I started having, I mentioned the auras and being able to see people's light. I also started receiving information. And it was like, suddenly I would be somewhere with someone doing something, and I would have this new information come in, like a download, just suddenly, boom. I would know. I would have these knowings, this understanding. And it was like, where did this come from? It's not something I studied in a book. It's not something I've experienced in my life. How do I know this? And how reliable is this new understanding? I'm an engineer, so I had to test it. I had to find out, is this really true? Is it Is it veridical information that I can use? And
is it verifiable? Verifiable information. What am I getting?
Yeah, and it was over and over. It was over and over.
What kind of information were you getting? Like, what kind of downloads were you getting?
Well, you
Just
see,
about
because I was a
people
chief
or
engineer, and
things?
in other jobs, in years as life progressed, I was
Mhm,
always always seemed to be a supervisor, and
mhm.
so I would have people working under me, and I would, excuse me, I would know things about them that eh, 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 and and just friends, coworkers, I would just know things. But like one example was we were on the ship just
Mhm,
before I left working at sea. um
mhm,
and and we were about to start another job,
mhm.
and I had this information come in that there was going to be a problem with the number 2 reduction gear in the engine room.
Wow.
And so I started stocking parts that were not our normal inventory. They weren't
Okay.
normally in our inventory. And they were expensive because we were talking about reduction gears. This is expensive equipment.
Right.
And they're the part after the engine that reduces the engine
Mhm.
rotation so that it's more of a speed that the propeller can handle.
Yeah.
And so so I started stocking parts for this reduction gear.
Mhm.
And the captain even questioned me on it. He's like, "Dave, what are you
Right.
doing?" You know, um, and I told him, "Cap, I just, it comes with experience." Again,
Yeah.
I was still hiding. I was still hiding a
Right.
lot of them. And then, sure enough, we were on a job. We were about 300 miles off Georgia's banks,
Wow.
and suddenly, reduction gear number 2 goes down.
That's
But
amazing.
I had everything I needed on board to be able to bring it back online.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? So after that, I'm sure your captain was like, "Okay, we'll pay attention to what you say. If there's anything else that happens, you know?
Yeah, well,
Okay,
I
well,
mean, yeah,
we'll
I
trust
mean,
your intuition there, you know?"
people, yeah, I mean, because it makes you reliable, right? It
Yeah.
makes you reliable in the face of people, that you're able to do the
Yeah.
job and get things done. And with coworkers and family and friends, it
Mhm.
was kind of like, I don't know how you know that, but
But
but you're right. And then we would talk about it. It was like, because you start shining your light, and people don't understand it, but they
mhm,
recognize it. They recognize
yeah,
that light within you when you start shining it. And
mhm,
so it's kind of an interesting it's an interesting thing to observe, because I've always been kind of an observer in
yeah,
all of this. When you're hiding from these things, you get to raise your awareness and become
mhm,
more of an observer. And so you get to see what's kind of happening. And so
yeah,
I always
I
saw
could
that,
totally
when I was getting spirit communication
mhm,
and I was relaying it in one way or another,
mhm,
I could see, because it was spirit driven, I could see how it would light up other people, you
yeah.
know?
It's the divine, you know? I mean, and I know, listen, talk about divine. There's divine interventions and your divine talents and the way the things that you're gifted with here on earth, and that's part of your light that you're supposed to share with the
Right?
world. And
Yep.
people, what's problem is that because we're in such a matrix and everything, it's been so dumbed down, people don't even know that they have it anymore.
Right. Right.
So
Well,
it's
we've
trying to
we've
connect with
moved
that
away
spiritual,
from
and
we've moved away from um I was fortunate when I was living in Arizona as a young man that I got to spend a lot of time with my friends who were Native American and their
Mhm.
grandmothers, and their indigenous belief systems were much more earth centered and
Yeah.
in a natural way, and they had this respect in life, in the way that they lived their life, that was very, very grounded and yet
Mhm.
spiritual at the same time. Okay. And
Right.
respectful, very incredibly respectful. And our culture has none of that.
No.
I mean, we really have lost, we've walked away, we've turned our back on a natural way of living. And,
Mhm.
and after my
Well,
near death experience, I went back and I explored that part of my
mhm.
youth because I found that respect, that way of living just resonated with what I'd experienced in my NDE.
Yeah. And it's true. It's like it's so interesting to me how because of okay, I'm going to bring up, big it's about money. Our society operates just about money and power. That's it. I mean, that's where we're at here. And they it's irregardless of anything else. So like we're trying to get back to natural medicine, getting rid of the big pharma stuff, in our lives, and going back to Mother Earth. And like in one of the things, I live out here on the Washington coast, and it's very beautiful here. I'm right by, I have a view of the water and everything, and we have the forest everywhere. And so
Yeah.
that's how I've been able to sort of stay grounded during these crazy times, on Earth in this time frame here. And I think the more that people unplug, what I mean by that is, unplugging from the 3D, the phone, the blah blah. I mean, yeah, we have to use this technology. I mean, look, we're talking now, obviously, to have conversations and stuff. But I think it's so important, especially, my niece has little kids, and I just, to think of the world that we're leaving them in. And it's so important to, like, we have to start moving away from the way we have been doing things, more into a natural way, and connecting with spirit, connecting with God more. I mean, I think it's the most important thing, because if you don't have that in your life, then you can be led astray. You know what I mean? You're just kind of an empty vessel with nowhere to go. And that's half of the problem. People, they don't know who they are. And we have now all this technology with the AI coming out, and everybody on TikTok, and you know what I mean? And so I think
Mhm.
that it's that culture, but they do that on purpose to lead us astray, so that we're not connected to the spiritual, to God, to that oneness, to that love. And we have to find our way back from that. I mean, and I think that's why I want to talk to people like yourself, because I think you guys have that foundation of knowledge to, like, maybe look, there is something more than this, and you are more than this. You just have to find it. So that's kind of how I'm seeing things these days with
Yeah, I
everything.
totally agree that finding ourselves is a common purpose that all
Hmm.
humanity shares. Is that
Hmm.
we come into this life and we're suddenly cloaked in this veil of separation.
Right.
We all believe that we're unique individuals driving through our lives, when it's not really true. It's a fantasy. It's we are interconnected. We like I experienced on the other side, I saw that we have these interconnections. When I'm thinking about someone,
Hmm.
there's an energetic connection that it happens just with a simple thought. And so I got to see this with the interactions in the life review and stuff like that.
Right.
But I don't believe we need to throw away the baby with the bathwater. I
Okay.
really believe, we co-created the world that we live in. We've helped
True.
co-create this. So
Right.
why not? Why, if we can get in touch with ourselves, get in touch with our
Hmm.
higher consciousness,
Right.
and be authentic beings, we can utilize what we've created in this world
Hmm.
in a more empowering and beneficial way. But
Right.
unfortunately, we're human, and
Yeah.
and and our egos, we have to learn how to balance our egos. Don't throw the ego out, because that's what gives us our drive in life.
Well,
But
that's
we
true.
need to balance it, keep everything in balance. If you look at nature,
Hmm.
like indigenous cultures do, everything seeks balance. Everything seeks balance. And
Yeah.
so it but we've forgotten that. and we try and we drive and we compete and we drive and we do all the, and we leave the balance behind.
Yeah.
And so the first step in getting to know ourselves is to re-achieve that balance within ourselves, to
Mm-hmm.
go inward, find out who we are, take the
Right.
time, it's critical. And then when you do that and you start living from your authentic self, then you start to see the flow of your life and you're
Yes.
able to move with that flow of life,
Yeah.
and that is when the juice of life really, really starts to happen, and things smooth out all at the same time,
It's
because
true.
but it's an allowing. And we don't live like that. We don't live with allowing life to unfold. We
Mm-hmm.
push our way through life. And as an engineer, I knew that because that's who I
Yeah.
was. I was driving my way through life,
Right.
and totally
Barreling through.
oblivious. Yeah.
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 Well, and two, it's like, when you say that, it's kind of like you have to have a trust in God and what your purpose is. It's a trust thing. You have to like leave it to the universe. In other words, leave it to the universe. Like if you have a problem, because I'm going through that right now. I just wrote my own book and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what it. I'm like, and I'm like, I gotta just give it to God. Give it to universe. Whatever happens at this point happens. And it's hard to do that. It's very hard to like have that trust in the universe and in like what, because it's out there, so it's whatever universe is meant to be is going to happen. You know what I'm saying? But it's hard to have that trust when you're trying to get through get something going, or even just trying to get through a new, like, even if you have a new job or whatever it is, to trust that you're going in the right path, you're going, and universe and God is going to take care of you. And it's very hard to kind of allow that vulnerability, because you're vulnerable then, in a way, I feel, because you're not driving it, you're allowing universe and God to drive it in a way. But that's what you're supposed to do. And we
Exactly. Yeah.
lost that,
Yeah. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
supposed to, um, we're supposed to allow it, but but that
Yes.
also requires paying attention,
Yeah.
being present, being totally present and mindful of what's happening around you, so that you
Mhm.
can interpret the signals that spirit's trying to tell you. Because when spirit's
Right.
communicating with us, it's not always, Noah, build me an ark.
Yeah.
It's not always like that. It's a lot of times it's a quiet, still voice. Sometimes it's just synchronicity that happens.
Hmm.
Like suddenly, you'll find something that draws you, and you'll learn maybe something new from whatever it is that's drawing you.
Right.
Okay. And then, son of a gun, if somebody doesn't come across your path that is curious about the same thing that you just learned, now
Yeah.
that's a purpose. That's a small purpose that you can now convey the answer that they need. And so
Yeah.
that's part of that interconnection. A lot of times we're put into situations where we can benefit others. And
Hmm.
that's another indigenous kind of belief system, is the hoop, that
Hmm.
we have our own personal hoop where we live in that we grow, we
Hmm.
become an elder, eventually we're going to die, return back to the earth. Well,
Right.
also we have our family as a hoop, our community is a hoop,
Hmm.
and our society at a large, our country, our world, are all
Hmm.
part. And so we're all interconnected through these
Right.
different experiences that we go through. And so giving back is just as important as receiving. and
Yep.
and we've kind of forgotten the giving back part. Well,
Hmm.
some people are very altruistic, but
Yeah.
a lot of people are more like, give me, give me, give me. and that's not
Exactly.
the and that's not the way to live life. Is you want to be reciprocal with everything that you do. You want to
Yeah.
give and receive.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting, um, how a lot of times I was very uncomfortable with receiving. to tell you the
Yeah.
truth, because I
So
I
have
didn't
I been
I
that
didn't
way
get
too.
that in my childhood, right? So
Yeah.
I didn't get a lot of receiving in my childhood. I didn't get a
Right.
lot of nurturing, and I didn't get, hugs. Oh my gosh, don't even come near me with a hug.
Yeah.
Um, after these experiences that I had, I suddenly started realizing, I'm only living half a life.
Mhm.
I have to be a part of the cycles of the giving
Mhm.
and receiving, and the giving and receiving. So receiving is just as important as the giving, but you want to do it in equal measure. Balance.
Right.
Balance is so key to everything.
Yeah, and it's energy too. I mean, that's how
Yep.
it's giving and receiving. It's all energy, and that's why it's like people who like the whole money thing. I mean, listen. I just use it. Yeah, you have to use it to survive, But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, what good is it doing sitting in a bank when you can think out either something that you're doing that would be beneficial for humanity or whatever, use it as like an
Yep.
energy source
Yep.
versus just hoarding it. And it's a huge issue. My family's whack, man, but anyway. But no, but you go and you go, oh my gosh, if we just like get into more of a like humanitarian space, I think,
Yeah.
and it's always like paying it forward. That's what I always call it. You got to pay it forward. And whether that's giving your time, your energy, your knowledge, your whatever it is, and it shouldn't be just take all the time. I mean, I know
Mhm.
exactly what you mean about that because it's a huge thing for me. I'm a huge believer in that you have to just you gotta everybody we're supposed to help each other. That's kind of how I look at it, and if I know something that I can help you, fine, I'll give it to you or whatever, and vice versa. And we're all living on the earth together. And I just think
Yeah.
it'd be such and we have what I call the people that follow us, me, and we call ourselves the soul tribe because we all
Mhm.
kind of found each other on during this time of craziness, and we've all kind of become this like little family. So it's been a fun little adventure, and so I think that people just need to start learning that they can create their own tribe, within your community. And then I really think the future is honestly is that people are going to start, getting more on a community level and really are going to help each other because who knows what's going to happen with the whole money system and all of that that's going on. That's crazy. I mean, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that? Because
Well,
it's
I
a
had a huge lesson. I had a huge lesson on allowing, um,
Mhm.
because I was an engineer, and but eventually I quit my life at sea. I transitioned into healthcare
Yeah.
because one of the things that a lot of experiencers experience is a call to be of service, to be more of
Mhm.
service. But I still had the engineer mentality in a lot of ways, and I would plan things, and
Mhm.
I would look at my bank account and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, in 2000, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung and bone cancer. The
Wow.
cancer had metastasized into my spine, ate away 2.5 bones of my thoracic, and my spine collapsed.
Oh my
And
God.
suddenly, I was out of work.
Wow.
Suddenly, I'm in a health crisis. The
Mhm.
doctor said that you only have 8 weeks to live. So put your affairs in order. They sent me home with morphine and Percocet, and I had a
Right.
broken spine. I had a collapsed spine,
Oh my
and
God.
my right lung was full of cancer, and it wasn't even operating. So I only had one lung, and
Oh,
and so this is a huge, it's like, whoa, a
yeah.
moment of clarity happens when you get a prognosis like that.
Mhm.
Absolute clarity. It brings you back to yourself and your spiritual self. Because yeah, I'd had these near death experiences, I'd had these spiritual experiences,
Mhm.
but you got to live in this world. And so, you kind of get pulled away sometimes from your spiritual center. And so
Mhm.
you this actually brought me back. And and my girlfriend, future wife at the time,
Mhm.
had this amazing belief that, hey, the universe will provide. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm used to working my tail off to make a buck, and
Right.
the universe will provide. What do you mean? And I got health bills.
Right.
I'm in a world of what, and
Right.
and the world is crashing down around me. But I had these experiences. And I also saw, and remember I mentioned I saw a part of my future. Well, the cancer
Yeah.
was one of the things that I saw in my future. So, but put that aside, and I realized that what my wife was saying was what I'd already learned about allowing, and about, and working within that flow, and allowing, and just, and project to the universe that, yes, here I am. I'm willing to do the work, sincerely willing to do the work, if you help provide with me, And so it was, a lot of amazing things happened to me that provided for me, for healthcare, for, because I
Wow.
used a combination of traditional, and because I remember I was worked in healthcare, and I really
Right.
did believe that we co-created a lot of this. And so I
Yeah.
used a combination of traditional and holistic approaches. And within 6 months, I was cancer free, which
That's
showed me
amazing.
that, okay, I still had a broken spine, but
Yeah.
but I was cancer
That
free.
takes
Hey,
a while. I've had 3 back surgeries. I totally understand what you're talking about.
yeah, I've had
So,
3
yeah,
spine
it takes
surgeries
a
as
while.
well to get it
Yeah.
eventually. Well, they didn't wanna do it at first because they thought I was gonna die, so it took them a
Right.
while to realize, but I was able to have 3 spine surgeries, and
Mhm.
eventually I was able to get out of the wheelchair, get out of the brace. I had a brace from
Wow. Yeah.
from,
Wow.
belly button to chin. I was trussed up
You
like a
had the
turkey.
full body one. You had the full
Yeah,
body one, man.
yeah, I had a
That's
full
worse
yeah,
than
well,
mine.
it yeah, yeah, because,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I won't go into all that, but there was
Okay.
they found, because of all my years as a commercial diver, they also saw I had bone necrosis, so it wasn't just my thoracic, it was my cervical, my thoracic, and so they had to
Oh
do
my
a lot
god.
of corrective surgery. I have an erector set in my spine.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
what did they do when you have to go through, like, an X-ray or whatever? You can't because 'cause you've got all that hardware in you.
You still go through, but
What do
it's
they
all
do for that?
titanium, so it's non-ferrous, so it's not a big deal.
Oh, okay. It's not like metal, like MRI or whatever if you have to do that. You can't
No,
go
no,
in
no,
that.
it's not like I can have an MRI because it's a non-ferrous metal. Titanium is non-ferrous,
Oh,
so
okay. Alright.
it's
Anyway,
not
but
gonna
yeah,
be
so you were
attracted to
saying
magnets,
that,
yeah.
you had so yeah, so you were saying that that you had to deal with all this, and you had another death, sort of like facing death like that. And
Mhm.
then so how did you what were some of the things that you did holistically, and that you kind of worked within the medical arena as well, to like rid yourself of cancer? Was it mindset? Because I know mindset is a huge thing. If you keep repeating that you're sick or you have all these issues, then that's the world in which you live in, right? So
Exactly,
how
yeah,
did you
you're
get out of that?
100% right. Mindset is huge, and so I used a combination of visualizations
Mhm.
of because what I did is I immediately started envisioning my life beyond the cancer.
Mhm.
So I started living my life as if I was no longer sick. I was
Okay.
no longer ill. I didn't have a dis-ease. But I also didn't view it as a battle. I just saw it as an obstacle that I need to overcome. It wasn't a
Okay.
war. I wasn't going to wage a war with this, because that type of mentality it really hurts your heart. Um, and so I wanted to approach this in a more empowering kind of
Mhm.
mindset. So
Right.
started envisioning our lives ahead, beyond the cancer. I
Mhm.
started, and I used visualizations of of wearing the cancer down like a feather. I used a feather analogy in my visualization. I actually went into and looked at my scans just so that I could see what the cancer looked like, so that I had that clear vision of how to approach and how to wear it down gently. Because also I worked in healthcare, and remember, we talked about balance. If you visualize that the cancer is gone, boom, then you're creating a void within your body, and that is not healthy. All right.
Yeah, that's
so
not
you need to gradually reduce it a little at a time.
Okay.
So this was, and Spirit kind of helped me with this, with this concept. And then, but then I also, by this time in my life, because this was in 2000. So, and I've had all these spiritual experiences leading up to it. I had a very spiritual community in which I lived. And I had, my circle of friends and community were all very spiritual. And so they were all coming with all these holistic, remedies and all kinds of things that, and so I had to use my guidance, and we all have guidance, and we all know what feels right. Okay. That's an intrinsic thing that we have as human beings. We know what's right, and we know what's good for us. And so, and we know what's bad for us. And so I would I would honor everything that people brought, and tried to tell me, oh, try this, look at this, and I would honor that. But then I would use my guidance to say, this isn't going to work for me, or yes, oh, wow, this feels right. I need to focus on this. So what you work for me isn't necessarily going to work for everybody, but I used a few things. In fact, I still take Essiac tea every morning. It's an Ojibwe cancer remedy that's made up of 4 roots, and you make it into like a tea. It tastes like dirt, but hey,
why can't they come up with something that tastes like chocolate, or something yummy?
But you know what? It's a natural. Anyway, that's one thing that felt right to me. The minute I drank it, it felt like, oh yeah, exactly. Boy, that's exactly what I need. So that, and I took some supplements because to boost my my digestive system, because the treatments actually, you don't eat well, you don't, and so, and you're not digesting food well. And so I took, you have to understand what your body's going through. And so then I took some supplements that had some enzymes that would boost my, boost my stomach acids to be able to digest the food better. And it actually had some food supplement type pills to take with it. And it was called Propax. It's still available today. Yeah. But anyway, and then I also, like I said, I used visualization a lot during treatment. And when they would bring the chemo bags in for infusion, I would set up a little mini altar on my treatment table. I would set up a little mini altar. The nurses, they allow you to do anything. You're the patient. You're in charge here, really. You just don't realize it most of the time. And so I would set up, and then I would say, before you hook this up to me, I need to pray over it. I need to, spend some time with my energy so that I could infuse whatever is most loving and most beneficial, and for the outcome that serves the universe, And so I would infuse that the chemo bags with that before they hook it up.
What did they think of when you did that? You brought in your altar and everything. Were they like looking at you like, okay, this guy is off of his rocker, or were they really supportive?
They were supportive. They didn't. They didn't. It's really funny because the doctors. Well, I had a number of doctors that knew my history, and and I still do today because I've moved away from my original doctors, and I had to come down
Yeah,
here, and they're all like, I have a medical record that looks like an encyclopedia.
I'm
Um,
sure.
but they're very curious, and so I'm honest. I share that I had a near death experience. I have a strong spiritual guidance that I use, and
Yeah.
and that I'm going to balance out traditional with holistic approaches, and I'm going to continue to do that. I just
That's
because
awesome.
that's what my guidance kind of directs me to do. So
Right.
so I know there are some people that really feel that holistic is 100%, and
Hmm.
God bless them if that's what
Yeah.
your guidance is telling you, go for it. But I also believe that,
It's
traditional
sort
is,
of
there's a purpose for it. We co-created it. There's a purpose for it.
right.
But to use it responsibly, and
Yeah.
people don't realize that, we are the patient. We have rights.
Hmm.
and don't give your power away.
Hmm.
Be a part of the healthcare team, but don't
Right.
just give your power away.
Yeah.
I actually sought out, I was in a fortunate situation. I was a manager in the hospital that I was actually
Mhm.
diagnosed in. And so actually I was assistant director, but
Wow.
that allowed me to pick my healthcare team.
Yeah.
I was able to pick my healthcare team, but everybody has that right to be able to pick your healthcare team.
Right.
What I don't want to get into a lot of the logistics, but
Yeah.
insurance tends to
Oh,
dictate a lot now.
yes.
So they're the ones that give the green light, to go
Hmm.
ahead with a treatment or not. But
Right.
once you have a prognosis, especially something that dire,
Hmm.
insurance usually is going to say, okay, you're allowed treatment, but
Right.
then,
Right.
but then use your guidance as to, I
Hmm.
had one doctor come up to me and say, oh, you know, we're just gonna make you comfortable and send you home
Oh my
because
God.
you've got no
I've been
chance,
like,
And I said, okay, great. You are no longer my doctor.
that's right. And that's the thing, but you see, people get so scared. I mean, you hear that, oh my God, I have a few weeks here. What am I supposed to do? Oh my gosh, and they
Yeah.
go into the fear mode, and fear is a huge thing about the control and the, you know, being able to like just control every us anyway. Fear is a major issue, and I think that people need to learn, first of all, to discern what is good for themselves and use their instincts more. And I think, especially in
Yeah.
that kind of a situation that you were in, I mean, it's so important that you get proactive and not just, okay, I'm going to go die over here in the corner and whatever he just said, he just gave me, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that people get scared and they don't want it. They're like, oh my God, to wrap their head around that.
You
But to
do
be
have to,
proactive, you know?
yeah, you do have to also remember my mantra was acceptance, tolerance, and truth, right? Well,
Right.
you have to accept the situation as well. In the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about the 5 stages, and
Mhm.
the first is denial, right? Well,
Right.
I went right to acceptance because I had already saw I was going to have it in my, and
Right.
so acceptance of your situation, and then tolerance, because in situations this bad, this
Mhm.
dire,
Mhm.
as a patient, you lose a lot of control, and
Right.
you have to allow and be tolerant that you don't always have a lot of control. Um, and that's
Right.
just the way, when you put the hospital gown on, you lose a lot of control.
Yeah, you
Okay.
do.
And
I
so, and that's just the way that traditional medicine kind of
mhm.
works. But you do have the control of choice. Choice is
Yes.
always yours. And so that's where you participate and communicate with your healthcare team as to,
Mhm.
I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. So use your power of choice but then allow and release,
Yeah.
control.
And that's the biggest thing that you have to learn to do. It's very hard. It is very, very
It's
hard.
not
And
easy. No.
I mean, I've had my share of issues that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just over it all. I'm over it. But yeah, you have to take control in some ways, and in some ways you have to relinquish that control, and it's very difficult, especially like if you're an independent person. That
Mhm.
it's just like, well, what do you mean? And I'm just very hard headed in that respect. As far as like, this is what I think, this is what I know, this is what I research, this is what I want to do, and it's just kind of like, well, you can't do that, or you have to do, and so I have issues with that, but yeah, you're right. You have to like relinquish control, and it's the hardest thing to do.
Balance. It's
Balance, yeah,
balance again.
yeah.
It's key. It really is.
Well, let me ask you this. So, in the beginning of our talk, you talked about the love that you felt when
Mhm.
you had your near-death experiences. Have you ever experienced that again here on Earth?
That's a long story.
I just
Um,
opened Pandora's box. Is that?
yeah, no, I'm not talking about love for another person.
No,
I,
I'm
I
talking
mean,
just the
I'm
unconditional.
talking more the universal love. Yeah.
Yes. Have you
I
felt that?
have experienced it.
Okay.
But it's not something you can sustain for,
Okay.
I met this one wonderful mentor,
Mhm.
and and when you were in her presence, you felt loved. The
Mhm.
only other person I've ever felt that way with is when I was in the presence of His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Wow.
And
You met
when
the
you're,
Dalai Lama?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, I took my Bodhisattva vows with His Holiness. Um,
Amazing.
but this woman um, taught me how to experience the light.
Mhm.
And so I was able to go back and feel that love. I was able to feel that love. And she was very she was well down the integration path to her near death experience,
Mhm.
and she was a great mentor for me,
Mhm.
and she taught me how to um, be who I am,
Mhm.
and to be able to touch that light and touch that love, and so yes, I have been able to find it. It's talk about release. That is a huge
Yeah.
release. It's a letting go on a whole nother level. But first, you have to raise your awareness to the point where you can
Mhm.
find your doorway, and be able
Yes.
to
So
experience it.
how that's the
Because
other
I
thing I
do
was gonna
that.
ask
I actually do that in my healing practice. Because what I
you
learned
do.
from healing myself, I do
Mhm.
what I call white light energy healing, and that's part of
Mhm.
what I do now. And along with quite a few, I
Yeah.
wear quite a few hats for a
Yeah.
retired guy. I do a lot. Um,
You're
but
probably busier now in your retirement than you were when you weren't retired, right?
actually, yeah, I am. I'm very
Yeah.
busy. Yeah. But it's I found that because that's pure
Mhm.
potentiality. Is when we cross over, we reunite with our wholeness, with who we really
Right.
are. Those light beings that we saw are in their totality, in their wholeness of who they are, and they're integrated with the greater oneness
Mhm.
of unity. And so we have the ability to touch that, and
Mhm.
to be a part of that and bring that more into our lives, so that we have more of our divine nature with us and available to us to be able to employ during all of our interactions.
Yeah.
So
Well, let me ask you how would you sum up what do you think, what is the easiest thing to try and raise our consciousness, or what is a practice that you can depart on our little soul tribe here to, because we're all about, we really want to, raise our consciousness, and we're
right.
trying to do that, and put positivity out there, and trying to manifest what it is that we want, because the veil is so thin right now, pretty much we can, manifest anything that you visualize, right? But do you have any kind of parting wisdom as far as, raising our consciousness and moving forward at this moment in
Yeah,
time?
well, I believe in a spiritual practice.
Hmm.
I like to use meditation. I like to use gratitude because I think gratitude is a state of grace. I think when we're fully grateful that we step outside of ourselves, and so
Hmm.
that's when we raise our awareness to a higher level. And I use that gratitude to start my meditation and my contemplative um, practice. And
Yeah.
so I believe that when we have a spiritual practice, that helps us to, and it may come in small increments. And the
Hmm.
thing is a spiritual practice has to start with discipline.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it just doesn't fall in our lap. We
Right.
have to, we have to develop a discipline that we are going to make the time to do it, and we don't
Yeah.
really have to go searching for it. That's the misconception. So we don't have to go
Right.
searching for our, it's because it's within us. It's
It's
within all
within
of
us.
us. It's a matter of finding the technique, the meditation, the spiritual
Hmm.
practice, whatever approach you want to take, is finding what is really comfortable with you, what you're
Hmm.
drawn to for a spiritual practice, and then follow it and create the discipline, and you'll find that it's there within you. And that once you touch that spark, it just
Hmm.
lights up. And
Yeah.
and so I think it's easy and it's hard all at the
Yeah.
same time, because I can say let go, but that's a lot harder for us to do because we're in a culture of where we're in our mind more than our heart. I like to listen through my heart and then realize it in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that there's you have the connection between your heart and the belly, that whole like midsection there, and that's what I've been starting to do every day, like just try and breathe. I do lots of just breathing, and then
Mhm.
I go out on the beach or whatever, and I'm in my happy place. That's what I call it, my happy place, and then I just connect with nature that way, and I think about all these things that thinking in my head of what I want to do, what I want my future to be. And then that's sort of how I've been doing it lately. I feel calmer. It's just a peace within where we're like, yeah, I get all kind of nutty in my head sometimes, and then I'm like, okay, I need to, because my mind just keeps going and going. I don't sleep very
Mhm.
well because my mind is just always going, and so I'm
Yeah.
learning that I need to like just take that, try and center myself, and that's sort of how I've been doing it. But that's just been
Yeah.
in the last probably like 3-4 months. So
Yeah, yeah, and
it's a process.
nature is an amazing teacher on how to come back to ourselves.
Yeah.
But also, you touched on heart and gut. Some of the
Yeah.
biggest receptors in our body that receive information from the world, from the
Yeah.
universe, are in our heart and in our gut. The gut ganglia actually are is a great receiver of
Mhm.
information. That's why, you hear old wives' tale about the gut reaction,
Yeah, the gut
Well,
react, right.
because that's a receiver within our body, and we need to honor that, as
Yeah.
well. Our mind is an amazing tool. It helps us to put things together, to
Mhm.
rationalize things, and when we start to balance ourselves
Mhm.
spiritually and emotionally and
Mhm.
physically, we got to bring all those elements together at one time: physical,
Yeah.
mental, emotional, and spiritual. Then our right and left hemispheres start firing in sync,
Mhm.
and so that's when it communicates with the heart and the gut all at the same time.
Right. Well, geez, well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. I mean, we didn't get through all you've had three, right? Near death experiences total,
You know what,
but
though? I like talking about living life
anything.
after these
Yeah,
experiences.
living life after it, right. I know, and I didn't get to talk to you about the dreams. Maybe I'll have you come on. I've had so many weird dreams lately. It's like insane. I mean, like I'm talking like warrior, fighting scary things, and I'm just like, oh man. And then, anyway, I'll have you. If you'd be so
I,
gracious as to come on another time, and
I
maybe we
can
can talk.
recommend a really good dream interpreter, but I'm not
Oh,
the
that'd
one.
be fantastic.
I'm not a great dream
That would be
interpreter. But
fabulous. It's been so crazy, man, lately. I don't know. I think it's the spiritual war that we're in. We're in spiritual war. We're in, everything, and I just think everything is, yeah, it's like trying to muddle through it all. So, but thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge. I thank you so much.
thank you for
So.
having me. It's been a blast.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I know it's like, well, I haven't talked to him, but I think it'll be fun to chat, a fun chat. So, well, thank you so much, and I guess I'll see you. You might hear from me again. I'm sure.
All right. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye. All right, so that was David Bennett. And if you guys want to check out some of his stuff, please go to dharmatalks.com. And I put it, I think, in the scroll thing that's over here, that's on the bottom of my screen. So thanks, guys, for joining us. And I hope that was really informative for you as it was for me. And I'll see you guys next time. I'm out of here. Have a great one, everybody. Bye.